So I would like to again welcome everybody to the very first 2016 meeting at the beer school. Our very first class this year is in water chemistry, being taught by Mike Eger, a longtime CFHB member, and also a water testing engineer. So a warm welcome for Mike. We're going to do water chemistry.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to correct Chris, and we don't call ourselves engineers because I don't know if we're that smart. The laboratory I work for is an environmental laboratory, and we actually do very little drinking water. We do the nasty water, the nasty stuff. So doing water for brewing is stuff I would actually drink it, not the water we get. So yeah, the environmental laboratory I work for is actually right not far from Millennium Mall. It's over here in Orlando. Called Accutest Laboratories. Well, we just got bought out, so it's going to be something else. So, obviously, water is important for brewing. I don't have to tell you guys that. How many people here do extract? Very, very few. Well, that's good because you don't have to worry about too much. Except the only thing you'd have to worry about is the minerals that were used when they evaporated your malt, which you don't know. So I would say you'd be fine. Don't worry too much. How many people here actually filter their water? With what? How many people buy their water? Why? That would be my question. Well, no, actually, the beauty of it is this is all about the extract brewing. So you guys are in pretty good shape as far as that goes. If you're going to mash specialty grains, you don't really need to worry about them changing the pH because specialty grains, you're just making tea. There are some ions that are specific for brewing. There's tons of ions that are in the water. 90% of them you don't need to worry about. Gold, aluminum, iron, all that. You don't have to worry about it. They're at such low levels. Now, the hardest part that we're going to have to understand is that the water you get at your house, you need to know what it's comprised of. That's the hardest part. Because I don't think, and I know I talked to Chris, I'm not sure your water company will tell you. They only tell you if you're not going to get some dysentery or some kind of intestinal distress from it. Other than that, I don't think they'll give you a report unless you pay for it. So when I get back to work this week, I will actually try to get together with them and find out how much it would cost to take. If anybody be interested in giving the water in to get it tested, let me know. So if I get enough people together, it may be cost effective to have. I can just bring you guys bottles, you fill them, and we test it, and you get a result. You'll get your numbers what you need to deal with. That's the hardest part, is finding out what you're starting with. Now, we can go through all the list of these ions and how they incorporate into your brewing, but I have a little handout for you. That would be actually even easier. How you doing? Thank you. There are some things as a brewer that you should keep on hand. And these are the water salts, the salts that I keep on hand, and I'm sure most of the other, even the all-grain brewers need to keep on hand if you really want to adjust your water. Now, if you want to adjust your water to a specific region to match, it's going to be very tough because the water composition that they give you, say from Dortmund in Germany, is just an average of the year of what the water's like. And then I'm 100% positive that all the breweries in Dortmund do something to their water as well. So to get it that close, you can get it close, but I would, as a suggestion for me, I would rather you adjust your water, brew your batch, and if there's something missing, if there's some aspect of the beer that you didn't get, like you didn't get the crispness from the some of the hops, then you may need to look at which of the salts, calcium, will help you get some of that. Magnesium will help. all of them will help, but some of them will hurt, some of them won't. Like you add too much salt, you're going to have salt beer, and that's not going to taste very good.
Look at that, there's one left over. Thank you.
I know for most like for all grain, I usually add a little bit of gypsum and a little bit of calcium chloride, and that's about it. I don't add much to it. I use, I know there's a lot of brewing software. Does everybody have a brewing software at least? Because there are water softwares out there that are free, and you can just plug in the numbers and find out exactly what you want. If you're going to start with distilled water, that may, if you really want to adjust your water and fine tune it, the best way would be to start with distilled water and add it as you go. And this little printout is helpful because it gives you the amounts based on a teaspoon size, because I don't think everybody here has a scale that can measure out half a gram. It's going to be very tough. Tenths of a gram. It's going to be very, very difficult. So now what I have here is, I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but what this is my water. I tested my water. I had it before a charcoal filter, and I had it after a charcoal filter. Now it's kind of hard to see, but what you're going to notice is there is no difference. There's no difference. So the charcoal doesn't take out any of the ions that you need, any of the salts that you need. It doesn't even change the hardness. My hardness is 112 and 118 before and after.
We just took out like chlorine.
That's it. Takes out nothing else. And I have another chart I'll show you. This is my water from 2012. This is from 2015. My chloride went up a little bit. None of it matters. It's all of those levels are irrelevant. We're talking parts per million. So that's a 3-year span. It's actually probably before 2012 because this was in my brewing software. That was my base water. It hasn't changed in 4 or 5 years. So the municipalities that do your water, they keep it pretty level. They're not going to tell you those numbers. Chris and I talked about that already. Unless it's really going to blow off the scale. And it's not happening. So for me, the most important thing is to know what you're starting with. If you really want to fine tune it and try to get ultra soft water, you're going to have to get that hardness way down. That right now, this hardness you see is 112, 118. That's just moderate hard water. It's only moderate. Soft water is like way down below. I wrote it down here somewhere. Some of those Pilsners that you need the really soft water for. Where did I write it? I forgot where I wrote it. I think it's got to be less than 60. So half of that. I could cut that in half by diluting it, but then I dilute everything else. So if I was using the brewing software or the water software, I could factor that in. And you can do it in the software. There's plenty of free ones out there. Question?
So what are some of the things you could essentially do to manipulate the hardness without manipulating some of the other components of it?
Well, that's yeah, perfect. That's the list of, oh, there you go. Well, hardness is comprised of, I'll show you right here, calcium carbonate and magnesium. That's how it's calculated. So those two items, if you want to increase your hardness without increasing your other things, you may switch to just chalk. And the magnesium is Epsom salt. That's going to increase your sodium, but not by that much. It's a very minimal amount. And it's not going to take, if you can see my sodium there is at 11,000, so that's 11 ppm. This is all in ppb. The technical director wouldn't let me change it. He said, let him do the math. Yeah, just move the decimal point. So, yeah, I would add Epsom salt and chalk if you want to increase the hardness, but not increasing the other content. And that's the beauty of having these, wrong way. Having these guys on hand. Because if you see, you got your chloride, you got your sulfates. They all have calcium in them. So they're all going to increase your hardness.
Okay.
But not necessarily, and they may increase other things. Now, your sulfate, not going to be much of a problem. Again, if you want a really hoppy beer, If you want to intensify the hoppiness, I would go with the calcium sulfate. Yeah, you're going to throw an IPA. But now the best way to do it, just like anything else, is to run some test batches. I mean, you can kick it up really high and see what happens, see if you perceive a flavor. Now you can just actually do a small batch, and just boil some malt, like some DME and some hops, and keep them in sanitized jars and weigh them out and see what they taste like. You'd be surprised how high it's going to take for you to notice. What's that?
Like sodium?
Oh, yeah. You would have to add a lot of salt to it. But if you can taste the water and it's salty, it might be right there. You might have gone too far. But again, you don't add much salt. I mean, you're going to have it. There's enough sodium in the water. You don't have to do it.
So, like, to reduce any of the quantities, pretty much your choice is just to.
So to reduce any of the quantities, your choice is pretty much just to blend with distilled water.
Dilution is the solution to pollution.
Yeah. So, and then add back anything that you've diluted away.
Right. There's no other way to do it. I mean, you can filter these out with an RO system if you want to go that far. But you're gonna have to add them back in anyway.
Yeah, but that's like starting with distilled water. Yeah. Okay.
So I do nothing to my water. I just charcoal filter it. That's all I do. I've had no issues with it. Now, some municipalities use chlorine. Some use chloramine. Chloramine is just ammonium and bleach mixed together. So it's an ammonium chloride. You can't boil that off. Well, you can, but not as well. You're going to need something to add to it. Knowing what they use, I'm not sure if they'll tell you that either. But I believe they should. You should be able to call them and find out. It may be in your report, but I haven't looked at. I don't look at them.
Yeah, my water system uses chlorine most of the year and chloramine in the summer.
Because it's
The
way.
heat is the heat of the summer.
Yeah, and most of that is to keep the water from growing stuff while it runs through the pipes and sitting in the pipes before you use it. That's all it is for bacteria and biological.
The question I had was that other chart you had with your water. Now, if you're using RO or distill, that pretty much takes all of that out, including the hardness, or
It will definitely take a lot of that.
So pretty much every one of those things on that graph's going to be zero.
Yeah, like I said, there's a whole bunch on here that you don't need to even care about.
Right.
You'll see the aluminum. There's a slight one with the tap water and the charcoal. That's because I hooked it up to a charcoal filter, and there's aluminum on the threads. So
Right.
it's
That's my other question is, will a charcoal filter get out the chloramine?
Yeah, the bigger ones do. Not the ones that sit on the faucet, but the household. Those are about to think of their bases. They're like Pepto-Bismol, Mylanta, right? And your mash, when you do those dark grains, they drop the pH. They make it acidic.
Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
No, it's natural. There's nothing you can do about it. But you can't leave it down below that 5.2, 5.8 range. That's where your sugar, your conversion is going to happen. So if you go below that pH, your enzymes aren't going to work.
So you want to add some like carbonate.
But by adding a little bit of chalk or a little bit of these gypsums, they'll help keep that balance in the pH.
More efficiency for the mash.
Absolutely. You keep it in that range. If you want to really fine tune it, that 5.2 to 5.8 range is like, that's the money shot.
Yeah, if you got it pH right.
Yeah.
You can add that right to the mash if you realize the mash pH is going off. You can add that.
Yeah, you can add it right to the mash. They'll dissolve. Magnesium's the only one that's a little harder to dissolve, but they'll dissolve. And that hot water, once you start heating it up, they're gone. It's not going to be an issue. But that's why you want to do it in the water first. Make sure you get that set. And matter of fact, when you check, if you add enough of these and you check that water, it may be above that 7. It might be in that 8 range. But then you're going to add it to the mash. It's going to be around the 5, and you're going to hit right in the middle. And I don't know about you, I've never had any issue with the pH. Only making mead is the only one that I've had issues with pH, and I had to adjust it. Making it more acidic is hard. That's a lot harder than making it basic. Because you have all these to make it basic.
What are some options for making it more acidic?
I think, oh God, what do I do? I had like phosphoric acid or something. Very mild.
Yeah.
There's not a lot out there.
It's basically phosphoric or lactic, right?
Yeah.
Cider vinegar. I mean white vinegar.
Ooh. No. That'll leave a taste, and vinegar never goes away. No, but very rarely you're going to have to deal in that situation unless you're making it all dark malt. I don't even think the pH would
If
get
there's
down
any
that
kind
low.
of dark grains in there,
No, if you over salted your water this much and your pH is that high, when you go to pour the water into the mash, it's going to look like chalk water. You're going to know you did a little. You're going to have residue everywhere. But again, I would just go with it. See what happens. I guarantee you, it's going to be a little bit harsh if you add that much salts and buffer that much of that pH. It might not. Your efficiency might go down because your enzymes aren't going to. They can't work in that pH.
Mike,
Yes.
I want to ask you, I had orange juice to try to get a little more acidic. That's about the only thing I've ever found in my meads to get it to move up, because if I put too much baking soda in there, I got to get it back up there where I wanted it.
Yeah.
Do you use hydrogen peroxide
No.
to adjust it all?
No.
For softness or anything?
No.
Okay.
Now I got a joke for them.
What?
Two scientists walk into a bar. One guy orders H2O. The other guy says, "I have H2O too." He died. There you go.
The water.
I've seen some recipes out there that actually call for gypsum.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the purpose of adding extra gypsum to a recipe, depending on how your water already is?
Well, here, I'll show you. You got gypsum there. You got your calcium sulfate. I had a list of. See how it does a mash pH balance for you. It helps. It also has. There's many ways. I mean, gypsum's not the only. Gypsum's just one of those readily available. There's other items to use. But gypsum has got the main. Calcium is the one that really drives a lot of these reactions. Calcium and magnesium are huge. Very big. But calcium is, as you saw in my water, you saw how much calcium was already in it. So go here. I'm already at 32 parts per million, 33 parts per million. And I don't have a recipe of another style. I wish I had one somewhere.
well, but I mean, if you're trying to match Burton water,
Ugh.
it's not the same as here.
No, Burton water, the bicarbonate, it's over 200.
Yeah, so that's why gypsums and other things are added.
Yeah, that's the only way to get them up. But when you add one, you're not just adding a single calcium. When you add gypsum,
some of these recipes that I've seen, and a lot of them are clone recipes. They
Right, but-
specifically call for gypsum.
Where did they get the water from? That the recipe just may be simply because our water is this, we added a little gypsum.
They live in.
You add a teaspoon of gypsum. What is that? 1 gram, 1.5 grams of gypsum?
I don't know,
5
but,
gallons.
but I mean, if you have to be careful because if your clone recipe was invented by some guy who lives in Boulder or in Pittsburgh or something like that, his water is not your water. So if he's saying add gypsum to get to a particular hardness or something, you may not have to do that. We live on top of a limestone aquifer.
Exactly.
So limestone, and gypsum and stuff is the gypsum. A lot of those are already in the water, right, from the limestone.
Absolutely. Like I said, calcium is one of the major ones of the mash reactions that we have. So by adding more gypsum, you're going to actually drop your pH. So you got to be careful into.
In a practical sense, and your water profile here looks very remarkably like mine in Winter Springs. And the Winter Springs people were kind enough to give it to me. But they tried to give me first a heavy metal analysis, which of course wasn't what I wanted. I called him up and told him I wanted this, and the guy hand delivered it. He drove out to my house because he wanted to know who I was and why was I asking all these questions about his water.
They take it personally.
Yes, they do. Yeah. But I happened to be brewing that day, and after he found out what I was doing, we were good buddies, and he spent a half an hour there watching me brew.
Yeah, so it's not far off, is it?
But in all practical purposes, we're a little bit low on calcium. We'd like to have at least 50 points per million calcium to bring the pH into line correctly.
Hence the gypsum that they add in most of these.
But we're already high in bicarbonate.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That's the Florida aquifer water right
Correct.
there. And we don't want to add more bicarbonate, but we do want to get the calcium up. So for all practical purposes in Florida, your only choices are calcium chloride and calcium sulfate.
Correct.
That's the only thing I've ever used in my water at all.
Yep. I use Epsom salt to make magnesium, but the calcium is without getting that, because you start getting over this 100, you get to 120, you're in the very hard water
Then
stage.
you get excess alkalinity, I think, is one of the technical terms for it.
We had a whole slide of residual alkalinity, and then
Your brains would just go. It's not.
you don't need it. Worry about that. But that will really, you start buffing up that carbonate, and your pH is going to be all over the place. And very hard to stabilize.
But the good news is that water right there by itself
It's perfect.
will make anything other than the most pale beer you want to get.
Correct.
If you really want to make a pale beer, then you got to go after something. But
Correct.
if you're going to make an amber ale or a porter or any of that,
Just
that
a regular
water-
pale ale will be fine.
that
But you
water works.
Right. You want to make a
Pilsner, you're gonna have to soften it up.
quite a bit.
Question?
Sure.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
past alkalinity a little bit.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could give us a brief explanation of what it is. Just because it's one of those things where every time I read up on water, John Palmer always pops up with his emphasis on alkalinity being the supreme thing you have to worry about.
I did have an article. But the problem I had with I took the slide out because do you still have the old one I have? We didn't say that. The problem with the alkalinity and giving everybody the residual alkalinity is that the calculations get so involved that it comes down to you're talking parts per million of ions that balance one way or another are not going to matter. You can see the difference in over a few years. Mm-hmm. I could run this same water 10 times at the lab. I'm going to get 10 different numbers every time. Because water's fluid. It's not a constant.
Yeah, exactly.
So calculating the residual alkalinity, I don't even have the calculation in my head. I have to look it up. I had a paperwork on it, but I will find it for you. I will find it just for you. No, I had a good explanation of it. And I just don't remember. I took it out of the slides because it's too much. I mean, it's a long calculation.
Gotcha.
For what reason, I don't know.
And it wasn't so much like trying to figure it out itself. I just know that like using some of the softwares for water manipulation, it jumps back and forth pretty regularly, and I'm wondering how much of an impact does that actually have above worrying about the right chemical or the right minerals being in there.
Well, if it's got to use these minerals for the calculation,
yeah, exactly.
So if it doesn't have them, it's not going to need it. But I don't know if your Smith calculates these as well. I don't remember seeing it on that screen. It may be a special screen, but I'll get it for you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
So, my question is, when you're brewing,
just in general, when you're brewing, you don't adjust your water unless you're making something that's really pale.
Yeah,
so, because it doesn't have any dark grains to buffer it.
Again, the dark grains are if you're only you're just adding for color and making tea out of it. If it's not your base.
So you're only worried about it if it's affecting your actual fermentability.
Correct.
Okay, so the mash process.
Yes.
Is there any additions or anything made after the mash process?
I don't add any after the process. After I do everything before the mash process.
Okay.
Because once you can, but I don't know what I've never really looked at what effect was after you've drawn off and you start adding your hops. If you change the water chemistry at that point.
Yeah, because I mean that's where practically the addition of things like chalk or gypsum affect the hop presence and the presentation of it. And I don't know how much of that is from the chemistry during the boil and the isomization, or if it's just residual from the mash process and what you perceive at the hop level because of that.
Right, I've never actually done that.
Yeah,
to add it out. I've always added, I don't know if you have, but I've always added it before.
Okay, do you add it to every bit of water, like your strike water and anything else?
I make up the full batch of water and
all ahead of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to keep it, because then I won't know what caused the problem.
So you just go for it all in your whole strike water?
I have it's like a 15-gallon, so I can put it all in there, get it all heated up, boiled up, and then I use it all. I even use it at the end.
Okay.
Top off water. So I guess technically it is in the boil, but it's not. I do use it to top if I have to get my volume, get my gravity right. So
some of it hasn't been through the grain.
Correct. But what effect that has, I doubt. It's not going to be very much. Okay. Again, we're talking really small concentrations.
Sit back, relax, and have
I'm not stressing about it.
No. He's like me. Taking charcoal and I'm good.
Is there any, kind of a broad question, increase mash efficiency? Is there a pH you need to be at?
Oh, absolutely. And the temperature, too. Those are two big things.
Yeah, the temperature, I understand, but in terms of I'm making a dark beer, I want to
You still got
add chalk.
Whether you're making a pale beer or a dark beer, your pH matters about your enzymes converting your sugars. So if that's off and the enzymes aren't efficient, there's your efficiency. If they don't convert your sugars, it's not going to matter.
In Orlando water, do you really need to add chalk or something?
Not unless I'm not unless I'm looking for something. If I'm making a really, really dark beer, I might add a little little gypsum or a little calcium chloride to get it, to make sure that my pH doesn't drop. But I also check the pH of the mash.
5.2 is about where you want to be. 5.8.
Yeah, 5.5 is like, if you hit that number, you should be good.
5.2.
5.5, right there. Anything, because it's factors of 10 and
pH meters have gotten much cheaper this year.
yeah.
I haven't tested
No,
their accuracy.
I use the strips, and the strips are not perfectly accurate, but I have strips that go from 1 to 11 from work, and they're pretty good. They get me real close. I know that if I'm in that, if it hits the 5, I'm pretty good. Between 5 and 6.
Does the temperature of the wort affect the pH reading? If you're doing like a reading on it with
Not
Okay.
direct, not direct.
Gotcha. I've just always been curious.
No. When you're doing a reading, you technically want it to not be when it's super hot. You like it to be room temperature. But you got to be consistent when you take the readings.
Yeah.
So if you're taking them at the same temperature, you should be fine.
I just always know, like with hydrometers, it can vary greatly depending on 60 up to 150 and
Yes,
all that kind of stuff. So
but there's a calculation for that.
Oh, absolutely,
I know
yeah.
nobody uses it for the old glass eye one. It's supposed to be like
I still
60
use it for
degrees.
temperature.
Nobody gets it to 60 degrees before they test it.
You can't do that in Florida.
Yeah.
Well, with Beersmith too, they also have the adjustment tool on there if you ever need to do that.
Yeah, I bought one of those fancy ones. Because one drop instantly, the temperature is fine.
Yep.
So is there any other questions? So I tell you this, your water is good to brew with. Let's take the chlorine out. And if you haven't done it yet, where you've gone and bought store water, try it. Brew the same beer that you make all the time with your bottled water, and brew it with the water from your tap, take the chlorine out, and see if the difference. See if you notice a difference.
What are some options for taking chlorine out?
There are only 2. No, 3. Charcoal, you can use Camden tablets for the chloramines, or you can boil it. Chlorine's volatile, it'll boil right off. Or you can just leave it sit overnight, and it'll go away.
If you fill a 5-gallon jug with it, 2 days,
It's gone.
all it
Not enough charcoal. No. Not even nearly enough. You need the household one. It's the only way to get it out. At a very slow rate. As slow as you, I would say as slow as you can handle it.
Yeah, it takes me 40 minutes to put water in my boil.
I just while I'm doing other stuff, I actually get it heated while I'm starting to do that. I'll put all my salts in there if I'm going to add any. And like I said, I use the software, so I already have mine in there, and if I want to make any adjustments, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes you want to play around, you feel like, oh, let's see if I can do, what's this going to do?
Any idea how long a carbon filter would last?
You know, I wondered that too, because I've used, this one that I used was in there for a long time, unused. So it had gone dry. No, I sealed the ends of it. So it was still full of water in it. And it wasn't funky because it's charcoal, there's nothing else going to grow in it. So I drained it out, I let it flush for a little bit, and it was all fine. It was amazing. It's like, I wouldn't go more, if you're going to brew a lot, then I would probably no more than 6 months. 3 to 6 months. It's a little different than your refrigerator one.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot, depending on the levels.
Number of batches.
Yeah. You'll notice. Start tasting the water as it comes out. You don't notice when you go up to your fridge and you go,
Yeah.
it's time to change the filter.
You start to notice the chlorine again.
Uh-huh.
All right. I have, obviously you wouldn't use hot water that's from a hot water heater to brew because it sits in the hot water heater and gives the flavor. I have a tankless hot water heater.
Okay.
And I will use hot water for my mash. I run it through my filter and it just saves me time heating the water. See any problem doing that?
No, but running really hot water through a charcoal filter, I don't know what that'll do to the filter.
Now, this is just
It
a
shouldn't hurt it, but depending on how hot it is.
Yeah,
One-
I mean,
140.
as long as it's not making your pipes really soft, your hoses or whatever.
I'm thinking it may, the pressure may build up in the thing and blow the seal out.
My hops are, my hoses aren't real temperature quality, capable on my filter.
No, but other than that, you shouldn't have an issue. I mean, the charcoal should work with every temperature strip of the chlorine.
As long as you're not using vinyl hose.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't put necessarily hot water in vinyl hose. It tastes like plastic.
It could. If it's food grade hoses, it should be fine. Well, you
I would put hot water into like a garden hose, for example.
Yeah. It's rubber.
Yeah.
All right.
Although, I don't know, the RV hoses, they don't taste as much.
Any other questions? So what I'm going to do is I have some people interested in having their water tested, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
So I will find out what kind of cost it would take to run just exactly what I got right there. That's all you need is your major ions. And I can actually dumb it down so it's just that list. You don't even need anything else. We can do the pH too, but that's just, it's not going to matter. It's 7. Thank you. The water, they do check that.
They do, because they don't want to pay for the expensive
No,
building fittings.
no. So if there's any other questions, let me know. If not, I appreciate your time.
Yeah!
Oh, and I do have some of my old brewing magazines that there's 2 good articles on water and water adjustments and all that.
The meeting started around like 4:15. Give people time to buy some stuff.
It's an open case. The case of Spread Eagle. Are the Browns still losing? Thank you guys.
Guys, huge thanks to Mike. That was awesome. I don't know if you guys learned anything, but I know I did.
So I got you for your. I'll get your residual.
Thank you.
And anything I find, actually, I'll send it to you. Yeah, especially there's a really I'll get a nice, easy version of what you need to go, and then we can send it to Chris. Awesome. Yeah, we can put it up. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
So we're going to take the next 10, 15 minutes, get the raffle going, all the good stuff. Now's a good time to pop up 2 beers, sample them out. If you have anything else you want to... Do we have the book as far as what people brought? Awesome. I'll get people to fill this out. We'll get the meeting started in about 10, 15 minutes. Enjoy.